Thank you all for coming. If Maggie were here, she'd just tell you all to make yourselves at home. The greatest thing about Maggie was this deep love that she had for Jenny. If I'm honest, I could have been a better father. Now I've got to do that. I got to be great for Jenny.
How you holding up, brother?
I can't believe she's gone. Things at home have been strange. What are you doing?
Baby is painting. Daddy, where do you think Mommy is now?
How's she holding up?
Jenny said she saw something in her room.
Where'd you see this?
I'm not supposed to tell. I missed you.
This is an angry soul who's trapped in this world.
I felt something up there. It's bad. Jenny?
Just come up, Samantha.
This is darkness.
What does it want?
To inflict pain.
She's trying to give us a message. We must be quiet, or else we'll scare her away.
Welcome, everybody, to Dead Talk Live. I'm your host, Viz, and it is my honor tonight to welcome writer, producer, director William Brent Bell with us, whose movie, Separation, whose trailer you just saw, is coming out very soon. William, thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing
Thanks
great.
for having.
Oh, no, thank you for being here. It is our honor. I saw Separation last night, and I got to ask this question right away, okay? Then we're going to get to the other good stuff as well. I got the impression, after watching the movie, that, yeah, the majority of the movie, we are dealing with that woman, that entity who they presumed was the mom. I'm not completely sold on that, but they presumed it's the mom. Then we have that contortionist entity.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is a completely separate entity that they just think it's a figment of their imagination. We only saw it twice. What can you tell us about the contortionist, who I found fascinating?
Sure. Yeah. The contortionist, that character name is Nereza, who's part of the Grizzlykin macabre group of, puppets and characters, comic characters. And the character was played by Troy James, who's just an incredible contortionist. And yeah, you're kind of right. Like, as far as that character kind of, as far as the reality of the film goes, lives in a bit of a world of his own. And in the comic, he's kind of a guide into this world of macabre puppets. He's a marionette puppet, so he has no joints. So if you were to hold him up and let him go, he would just collapse into like a pile of wood. Which was why, Troy bringing him to life as a contortionist was so amazing. And so it's a character that, would live on past this story, for instance, if we wanted.
Exactly. And that would be perfect if the franchise does continue. I personally think, and it could be anything, it could be a demon, for all we know. That there was so much negativity in that house before the mom passed away, after the mom passed away, the feud between Rivers and Jeff for custody of Jenny. There was just so much negativity. It very well could spawn up a demonic entity. So the door is completely wide open to that. So let's get started. Let's go back to, how did this project come your way to not only direct it, but to also be a producer as well?
Yeah, this is the first movie my production company produced or co-produced, The Machine Room. So that was really cool, very important. I was having a meeting with a television executive named Gloria Fan, and she works for Fox and Disney. And she had been developing several movies, but she couldn't touch the movies anymore. And this was a movie she had been developing. She's like, you might like this. Do you like the movie Kramer vs. Kramer?
Yeah.
And I was like, for me, it's like my childhood, that movie. It was in
Dustin
Kentucky.
Dustin Hoffman, yeah.
Dustin Hoffman, Meryl Streep, and their 8-year-old son, who was nominated for an Academy Award at 8. And I don't think he won, but pretty amazing. And I was like, I love that movie. She goes, well, there's a script where, the mother dies and then, seems to come back. And I was like, I love that. I was like, even if the script was awful, I would work on the script enough because I feel like I know that movie already. And so I tracked the script down because she couldn't work on it because she's in television now. And when I read it, I was expecting the worst, and I loved it. And the biggest thing they brought to the table, other than that idea, was the world of, the fact that he worked in the world of comics in Brooklyn. So that was really cool. And I was like, this is very fresh. But that's how it came to me. And then I brought the script to the financiers, Yale Productions, through a friend of mine named Jesse Corman initially. And they really wanted to work with me, and Rainmaker Films. And they were small. They had done a lot of small movies, and I was like, this is one that's really special to me. They're a New York-based company. And I was like, let's put this movie together and go make it and do something really creative and personal. And they were super supportive. And then, 6 months later, we were in Brooklyn prepping and shooting the film.
I love the fact that I'm from New York, and I love the fact that you guys shot on location in New York City. This movie had a great cast. Rupert Friend, Brian Cox, that girl, Jenny, Violet McGraw. She's so talented. Yeah. She's such a talented young woman. How did you have any kind of say on the casting? How did that work out? I mean, what was your role when it came to the casting of this movie?
I mean, my role, kind of as a director, usually, certainly being a producer of the movie, I kind of have the main say in that, and within reason, a lot of times we're looking for certain actors to kind of help click into place the financing model of a movie, right? But this one, it didn't require that much of that. With Violet, it was about searching, and looking at every girl between the ages of 6 and 12, like that have been in and out of the doors in Hollywood, and then finally finding her, which was, for me, I was almost going to have to rewrite the part because I thought this is going to be impossible to find a girl who can do everything she has to do, and we only have her for 4 hours a day, and I was like, this is going to not work out. But then when I saw her audition, it was like, this is incredible. She's talented. She can do everything. And I got to watch the movie with her last night. And someone like Brian Cox was, the writers actually wrote that part with him in mind several years earlier. And that was my first choice. I didn't even know that about the writers. And we were like, what about Brian Cox? And I said, that would be number one. And they're like, well, let's do it. Let's get him. And the producers, to their credit, they just were bold about it, and they kind of put their money where their mouth is and made a good offer, and he agreed to do it. He lives, in Brooklyn. And so at one point we shot like right around the corner from his apartment. I'm a big fan of Brian Cox. I mean, for a long time now. Yeah. I mean, I don't know anyone who isn't. And it was really a dream come true, like realizing we were going to be making the movie with him. And like I said, the writers were just like, are you kidding me? Like, that's just, like, okay, who would be this guy? God, Brian Cox is the model for this character. And then he's doing the movie. Same thing with Mamie Gummer. Her mother was very much the model for that character from Kramer vs. Kramer. Yeah. And Meryl Streep. And they even looked similar. Yeah. And I was like, she'd be great in this part, but she probably never wanted to do it because it's kind of, the horror version in a way of that movie. And about 6 months into casting, her people called us and said, hey, we think this would be great for her. She loves it. Would you be interested in meeting with her? And I was like, this is perfect. And then, of course, the first time I talked to her, she's like talking about her mother's performance in Kramer vs. Kramer and how she wanted to do some things differently. And it just was, for me, kind of mind blowing, because I was like, this is really working out, amazingly well. Rupert was incredible. He was perfect for the part. He's such a lovable, likable guy. He's also a really great artist. I didn't know that.
Oh.
So sketching and stuff he was able to do himself. And then Matt, a couple of people, Madeline Brewer was amazing. I loved her from Handmaid's Tale.
Mm-hmm.
And Simon Quarterman, who I've done 2 other movies with, and he's one of my dear friends, was perfect, coming in playing Alan. So it was just an incredible cast, especially for such a little independent film.
It was great seeing Rupert back on the screen. I became acquainted with Rupert when he was on Homeland, when he was introduced to us years ago on Homeland. And I loved him as the character of Peter on Homeland. Now, as a director, when you have such a talented cast, how easier does that make your job?
Well, I've always heard directing is 80% casting, or casting is 80% directing. And I really believe that. And so for me, it's like finding the right cast is everything, because at that point I can let them run with the character. And so if there's a sticking point in the script or a logic issue with the character, I put it to them and I'm like, okay, you're the character, like what would you do or what would you say? And then they run with it, because I'm thinking of 100 things and they're thinking of that one character. And making sure that they do everything right that they think that character would do, that's motivated, and that it sounds like their voice. And so it's everything, it's so important.
I can totally understand that. Now, you said earlier that before you read the script, if there were parts you didn't like, you would work with it. Did you actually have to do that? Had to change some parts of the script to, I don't know, better? You're an experienced director. You've been doing this for many, many years. Did you have to change certain aspects to make sure it plays well with the audience?
Absolutely. We worked really hard on the script for months and months, probably 6 months, like solid. And then even in prep, the locations changed things, and then just really thinking of trying to make it tell the best story that balanced, drama and horror in the right way, and that brings to life New York in the right way. And then as the actors came on board, especially Rupert, like we would just go and have sessions and kind of rework scenes a little bit to fit, the specificity of the location and exactly what he wants to bring to the part. So it's, there's writing changes every day all the way in through shooting,
For you, how important were Jeff's friend who works at the comic agency and his associate? Right. How critical do you think, in your opinion, were they important to the storyline?
Super important. One, it kind of showed you a different side of Jeff. It showed you, what he had to deal with, whereas he wasn't a very responsible parent and he wasn't interested in kind of taking a back seat to his dreams, but he did that. He did that for his daughter. And what I love about that is I find that when people do that and they give themselves to something bigger, everything works out. Yeah. And so for him, that's kind of the journey for him, is like he finally gave up on kind of his unrealistic dreams, focusing on the bigger picture, which is his daughter and protecting her. And that led to his dreams coming true, sort of. And those guys, and they also provided a lot of comic relief in the movie. And they provided the source for a lot of the support for the mythology of the film, by telling the story. Yeah. So they were super important.
Especially the associate, and because he was, Peter's reference into the supernatural. This guy was a very spiritual person, and it was someone that Jeff could turn to for information. Now, when you were assembling this and you decided to go the route with the lady where, like I said in the beginning of this broadcast, we're kind of really, even at the end, questioning, is that really the mom? Is that what you wanted the audience to walk away questioning? Is that really the mom? Because there are certain scenes that a mom, when they're on the ledge, we're on the ledge, and Violet goes forward. What is she trying to do there?
Well, I for one thing, I'm glad you picked up on that stuff. I, on one hand, really love the idea that stories, like for me to tell you somewhat like what the intention was, is kind of defeats the purpose of you saw the movie. So it's like you can walk away as long as it's not a frustrating answer. The debate is great, But as far as the character goes, if it was her mother or if it wasn't, the kind of mythology there was, if it's mom, it's not mom exactly. It's a perverted version of her. It's a disturbed version of her. So I kind of equated it to, if it's her, she's not quite safe because it's like she's off her meds, and so she can't quite control her anger or her thought process. So like in that scene, where she loves her daughter very much, from what it appears in that scene, she's questioning, is my daughter safe with my ex-husband, and is she safer with me? And so for a moment there, she almost pulls her over to the other side, and then kind of thinks twice of it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where the story leads later as well, is like this crimson void, which is her world, in between worlds. Is I think a good ghost stories a lot of times are about entities or souls that have trouble moving on, and so very much we're playing on that kind of mythology for this movie.
Now,
but I do like that people don't quite know,
Yeah, like you said, it starts a great debate, and it can really go either way. There's an argument for and there's an argument against. Was it right there in the beginning of the script, a whole plot twist involving the character of Samantha?
Sort of. It was there initially. It was different, and then so we shifted kind of the role of it. It didn't really have anything to do with the mother. Anyway, it was different. I'd have to think about I feel like, it was similar but different. And then we developed it more and more to make it feel a little more organic to the story and satisfying, hopefully, for the audience.
For me, as the viewer, I thought it was just, Rivers, Brian Cox's character, just, he hated Jeff so much. And of course, they hit. I just thought it was literally a hit and run. I really didn't think twice about it. We know Jeff is not the kind of character that would do that. Okay, that is very apparent in the opening minutes of the movie. He's not the kind of person who's going to take out his wife. So for me, it was just an accident. Well, a person got hit on the road, drove away, and that plot twist really threw me. I did not see that coming.
In a good way or a bad way?
Good way. I love plot twists.
Yeah,
I love plot twists.
That's the fun of creating a plot twist like that, is making it track, so that there's no cheat involved from a storytelling perspective, but also making sure that it's not something. I mean, the way I like it is it's not something the audience is hopefully even considering, because there's other things kind of garnering their attention. So when that comes, and I, like I said, I watched the movie last night at a theater with Violet and a big audience, and when that happened, like the sound in the theater was great, and I wanted to stop and go, what does this sound mean? Like everybody like, oh, and like, just sometimes the reactions, like if you hear laughing or if you hear silence or a gasp, it's always great, because I just want people to be reacting and enjoying themselves. And so, it was fascinating, because I was kind of like, what did you guys think of that? But of course, we're watching the movie, I didn't want to interrupt it. But it seemed like getting that kind of reaction, it sounds like you had a good reaction to it.
Oh, yeah.
Means, we're doing our job in a film. And I definitely, leading up to the moment when that started to materialize in the story, I was looking around the theater going, I don't feel like people are even thinking this is where this movie was headed. So it's nice. I hope it resonates in a good way.
It does. It did with me. Now before we continue, I see you have the puppets in the background. Are those the actual ones used in the movie?
Yep. They are. These are the puppets. Yeah.
So they let you keep them and they're yours.
Yeah. We had them in storage for quite a while, just for safety. And I was traveling some too. And these are one of a kind, hand carved puppets by a guy named Craig Marin in New York. And they're based on the characters in the comic, which are it's a whole world sort of. And we were having the hardest time figuring out like who was going to create these until the last minute. And then our production designer Ola Maslik, who I hired because she had great experience, but she came from a puppeteering background. That's what she graduated college doing, and so she had a real passion for puppets, and like I do. And then at the last minute, she's like, "I found our guy." And when he created the first puppet, and they sent it to set, they're like, "Okay, the first puppet, you can see it." I expected like an interpretation of the drawings.
Yeah.
But I mean, what he did was like, wow, this looks so much like the drawings brought to life. It was so cool.
They're cool.
And I even, I filmed, Violet knew about them, Jenny in the story. But Scarlet, which was her main puppet, had not been completed yet. And we started filming and she kept asking me about Scarlet. And so when she arrived on set, Scarlet, the one with the mask, we were filming the scene with her and her dad, and they're playing around with the puppets and they're drawing. And we brought it over and filmed the scene, and I had Rupert introduce the puppet into the scene, and she'd never seen it. And so her reaction was completely, authentic of like, oh my gosh. And it was so great to see the excitement, and we have it on film forever. It was very cool.
That is a very cool story. Now, sticking with the theme of dolls, do you have the doll from The Boy as well?
I have parts of the doll from The Boy, and there's a couple back here.
Uh-huh.
And it's a whole thing, it was a whole political thing. When we shot the first film, they're like, we can't give you a doll now because we might do a sequel, and we just have to protect that. The head of the studio, though, in his office, he still does, he had the doll sitting there. And then when we did he had Brian Henson from Jim Henson's company come in and animate and build robotics into the doll. So the doll is animatronic. So in his office, he has buttons under his desk. So if you're having a meeting with him, and it's very subtle, like Brahms's eyes will just shift or his head will turn the slightest bit and freaks people out. And so they promised me the doll when we wrapped the last one, but Lakeshore, one of the companies behind the film, went bankrupt after all these years. They just finally checked out. And then the politics of, hey, where's the doll? Like, when do I get the doll? And it's like, well, we don't know. Yeah. So I'll get a real Brahms. But right now I have one of his heads and then one of his like cracked heads.
You could be like Dr. Frankenstein and assemble him all together at the end.
Yeah, I'll make my own Brahms. And that is, I don't know, you probably never saw it, but originally the button to the last film was a doll maker who's making the doll, and we realized there were two all along. It was a cool little scene. So there were four of them, yeah.
So several of your movies include dolls, including Separation, which are puppets. I know there's a little distinction.
Yeah.
But as a filmmaker or even personal, do you have a fascination with the possibility of dolls? Did they, like, for some people, dolls might have freaked you out as a kid, and this is your therapy to try to get over that fear. Is there some kind of association that you have with dolls and bringing them to life, especially in horror movies?
There definitely is, and I think it took a while for me to realize that. So you probably know Trilogy of Terror.
Mm-hmm.
It's a ABC. It was probably the first scary thing my sister showed me, and it was an ABC TV movie that had 3 chapters. Each starred Karen Black in different stories, and one of the stories is about a Zulu doll that she brings back from a trip, and it said, if the doll's chain is removed, that the doll could come to life with the soul of this warrior or something like that. And I remember as a kid, she comes back into the living room and the doll's not on the table. And then she looks around and she pulls up the chain from under the couch. And I remember just as a kid going, oh, like, that means where's the doll? And then sure enough, that doll chases her around the whole movie with this big butcher knife for part of it. And so my whole life, I grew up thinking, until I was about 10, that if I put my legs down on a couch and let them dangle, that a witch was under the couch and that doll was with her, and that she would grab my ankles and he would cut my feet off.
Oh, God.
And I believed that for like 5 years. And, but I didn't really think I had some crazy passion or connection to dolls until I started working with them and going, oh, wow, that is one of the main memories of film in general, storytelling, that has just remained imprinted in my mind. So I have a real passion for it, but it took a while for me to realize how much it was like scarred into my brain.
For me,
it really is.
For me, it's the Poltergeist clown
doll.
Yeah, terrifying.
That too.
Terrifying.
Yeah, everything about it,
Now, was it
exactly? That was another one.
Well, in 2006, you directed Stay Alive. Was that your directorial debut?
I did a tiny independent film, which was kind of like the equivalent of my student film that me and some friends of mine made for like, $25,000, $30,000. And we never really finished it, but Stay Alive. And then I started writing, and I was kind of a writing partner, Matt Peterman, a filmmaking partner, who we ended up making a few movies together. We were writing kind of big studio movies, and I wanted to make movies. And then Stay Alive was the one we were kind of waiting for the right time to make. And then we turned that into the movie that you saw. So that was the first real movie I did, the first studio movie, first horror film.
Gotcha. Let's talk a little bit about The Devil Inside. I really enjoyed it. I want to ask you about that disclaimer that's in the start of the movie about the Vatican. Was that there just to, perk up viewer interest? What was that about?
And you mean like something like the Vatican? Well, there were two disclaimers. There was a disclaimer about the amount of exorcisms that had swelled up around the world, and that was where the whole concept came from. I read Matt and I read an article about the fact that after 20, 30 years, the Vatican had started a school for exorcism, and that's all true. Mm-hmm. And up until that point, they had pretty much disassociated themselves with exorcists. So, and still probably now, exorcists could not get any kind of time with the Pope. They were not considered real to them. And then truly they said that like there was all this possession and demonic possession happening. So they leaned back into exorcism and brought that school. So that's what started the whole idea, was like, let's do a story about this school. And so yeah, it was totally based in real data, and also we tried to interview priests. We interviewed so many people, but we could not get true, real priests to really state their case on it. Because those are real interviews in the movie, and there were way more than you ever saw in the film. And it was interesting. It was like, hey, you have your chance to kind of state your case on like, is possession real? Is exorcism real? And they're like, the church won't let us do it, Wow. So we never interview a real one.
That was actually going to be my next question. How much research did you do into, not only Catholicism, but the whole practice of exorcisms? It's very well known now that there is a school that, the Catholic Church does give in Rome for exorcists. So they do take it seriously, but they don't like publicly acknowledging it. It's like they want to keep it at an arm's length, but they've also come to realize that it's something that is needed. So how much access were you given to? I know you weren't allowed to talk to any priest. What other research did you do for The Devil Inside?
We talked to priests. They could just never go on camera on record. We talked to everything from experts in neurology and violence in people due to complex partial seizures and brain damage, to spiritualists, and like every aspect of it. And they're in the movie, and there's a way longer version of the movie that's like just a documentary about all these people. And Elaine Warren, we interviewed Elaine Warren. So the research was intense. and as far as the access to actually the Vatican, we went to Rome because we shot the movie like in 14 days, and went to Rome, and everything in Rome was stolen. And so I think I spent about 2.5 hours in the Vatican filming without their permission. And I don't know how like Paramount was able to buy the movie and then release the film. And the camera work is Vatican City. It's real people. I had, Isabel, Fernanda, is the name of the character, Fernanda Andrade. Like, it would be like, hey, walk up to that police officer, in the middle of Vatican City and ask him directions. And we filmed it all. And there was so much in the movie of her just like wandering around the Vatican, and then we'd see something interesting, and it would be like, go in there and interact with these people. And then they didn't know we were filming. It took so about 2.5 hours inside there, but none of it was sanctioned.
Okay.
But somehow Paramount was able to skirt the legality of all that,
And the Vatican obviously didn't raise a stink about it, so everything is good. What was your intent in that film ending abruptly the way that it did?
A couple things. It was like, originally the movie was financed as like a big studio kind of flatliners in the world of this exorcism school, and the financing kept kind of falling apart just because of the way things had to go. And one friend of ours who is a really successful businessman, he kept saying, if you get sick of this Hollywood bullshit, come and call me and let's talk about making the movie for like nothing. And I remember going, gosh, like what we're talking about, the movie for like $500,000 is, how are we going to live if we do the movie that small? And so we started talking about it and agreed to do it, and because at that point, the only thing that was really like it was Blair Witch and maybe Cloverfield. There was no Paranormal Activity at the time. And but when we got to the point of getting close to making the movie, it had a whole big third act. And I remember, he was like, what if we just stopped the movie like at the car crash? And it's like, we're doing a tiny independent movie. Why not? Like, we can, like, why does it have to follow a perfect 3-act structure? Let's shock people with like, sometimes the devil wins, the movie's over. And but we always thought, once the movie was bought by Paramount, and we did debate it, and we created things that we almost shot, like we talked about going and shooting a different ending, and then the card that came up at the end of the movie had nothing to do with us. That was a whole thing that was kind of dictated by the president of the studio, and he apologized to me for it years later, because he never watched the final version of the movie. He never tested the final version of the movie. And we originally thought that that card that said for more information, which is very true to a documentary, would happen after the credits, not right after the movie ended abruptly.
Yeah.
So ending abruptly, I thought was cool. And it would be shocking to some people. But then to throw that up, people thought that meant we were trying to get more money from them to go and like go to a website to see more movie, when that wasn't the case at all. But it was interesting. It was a really interesting experience going through that with the world, sort of.
Now, the majority of the movies that you have directed deal with the paranormal / supernatural subgenre. That's my favorite subgenre in horror. For you, what is the appeal of the paranormal and supernatural? For me, I can tell you it scares me for real. I see it as something that it's the only subgenre that actually still scares me.
That's one thing. I mean, there's just a huge part of the world who is, of course, scared by that. So that's exciting as a storyteller. But for me, it's, and there's times we talk about different ideas, and they're like, well, at the end of the movie, was it real or was it not? I was like, well, yeah, it was. We're getting to do a movie to where you can see something in your imagination that is supernatural, so we can't quite prove it. But in a movie, we can prove it, or in a movie, we can show it. And so whether it be exorcism or a werewolf or the haunted video game or haunted puppets or a haunted doll, it's like, that's the fun of it, is I get to take the story into an imaginative place, and whereas in the real world, we can't exactly do that.
That's a great answer. Going to the Boy in 2016, a huge hit. It was a huge hit. When you were making it, directing it, did you know that you had something special there, or did you have to wait for it to come out and see the reaction, not only from critics but from fans, that this is a really, really good movie and it got a lot of attention that it rightfully deserved?
You know, I have written, co-written, and everything with a lot of the projects I've done, and that was the first time that I actively moved forward on a script that wasn't mine. And a lot of times when I'm submitted horror scripts, they're just not very good, because I feel like if it's really good, the filmmakers will find a way to make it. Whereas if it's submitted to me through a studio, or it's never quite good enough, I don't think. Otherwise, like I said, the writers would have found a way to make it. And so with that movie, Gary Lucchese, I had a meeting with him and he was like, "Hey, take a look at this script if you think." And I thought it was an interesting concept. Read it that night, loved it. I mean, it was so great. And within no time, so much was happening in the movie. It was such a great mood. Stacey Menear is such a great writer, created such a cool world, had such a great twist. So I was like, wow, this is really good. Like, this is really special. And then as we put the movie together, and the fact that it takes place in mostly one location with pretty much no more than 2 or 3 people at any one time, it's one of those deals to where, like, I felt like this is our game to lose. We have such a great script. In creating the doll, he turned out so great. The crew behind me, like Daniel Pearl as the director of photography, it's nobody better, certainly in that space. And then the location for the house, it was just like, wow, everything was coming together really nicely. And I was like, the only reason this shouldn't work is if we screw it up. Mm-hmm. And I feel like it was just kind of trusting the process and trusting the script. And Lauren Cohan, like, she was perfect. I mean, everything it turned out really great.
Lauren Cohan, who is in The Boy, it was just right around, slightly after the peak of The Walking Dead, where it had like 15, 20 million viewers per week. How much do you think Lauren Cohan being in The Boy contributed to being such a big success, getting people out to the movies to watch it?
I mean, she was amazing.
She was.
But I don't think there was anything about kind of the data or the numbers that indicated Walking Dead had a particularly big impact on the movie. But I know that they embraced her role in the film. Yeah. So I think it was great for the movie. I know it didn't hurt. And I really love that fan base, because what I love about The Walking Dead is that it's about characters, really. Mm-hmm. And but I don't know that we were like, oh, it was The Walking Dead that made it successful. I think a lot of times these types of movies have to cross over to more than just a horror audience to be really successful, which is what The Walking Dead does. And it was my dad's favorite show, which was so unlike him. And she was his favorite actor in the world at the time. So it was pretty cool. But I mean, I know it didn't hurt, but I don't think it was a magic.
I agree. The movie stands on its own. Lauren did a great job, but you could put another great actress, and the movie would have done just as well. What inspired the idea for the sequel for The Boy?
What's funny, I mean, I always thought the sequel, like in creating the first, I thought we were creating a new slasher, like a new Michael Myers type character.
Okay.
And which I think, in a way, Brahms, the adult Brahms, is that he's a great murderer character, slasher character. But they really were slow going in like coming around to doing a sequel. And then it was pretty much, strangely, they saw that the doll remained became a meme. Mm-hmm. And he was living on way past the movie. And in particular, he was always being compared to Jared Kushner. And so it was weird. And that was it. I mean, that was what Gary Lucchese, from the guy that gave me the first script, that was the phone call. Was like, Brent, like, why haven't we made a sequel? People just still are enamored with this doll and this Jared Kushner thing, you know? And I was like, yeah, that's interesting. So then it was like, all right, well, let's figure out like to develop an idea. But then the focus became more about the doll and not the real Brahms. But I always looked at it as more of a trilogy anyway. You know, that there's two big not villain, they're kind of heroes, but Brahms the doll and Brahms the real Brahms. Like we're two characters who kind of have a lot of rich mythology between them.
It sounds almost like, you know, if it was left as a single movie, you would have been completely fine with that.
Yeah, it's a cool. I think we were really lucky to be able to do a movie that was such a slow burn, to where it had such a low body count, but still was engaging to the audience and scary, and then having that kind of fun twist that introduced a whole different vibe to the movie. So it was a great standalone movie. But I, as a creator, as a writer, storyteller, I fall in love with the characters, and so at the end of a 100-page script or a 100-minute movie, I'm like, I'm just getting to know them, and that's why, to me, continuing those stories is exciting. Yeah. You know, but it has to be the right story. You know, and you have to have time to tell it.
Exactly. Do you consider yourself a lifelong horror fan, or like did you grow up and remembering as far back as you can remember, you've always loving the horror genre?
Absolutely. I think other than something like Star Wars, before up until like ages of like 8, it's the only memories I have of movies are scary movies.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
And it's a lot of times it's like The Omen, like Damien in The Omen. I think I was relating to these kids, the twin brothers and the other, the doll in, like you said, Poltergeist, the clown, like things like that just stuck with me. And I don't think it was always a conscious thing, like meaning I didn't like have horror movie posters only up on my wall or something. But they are the things, especially as I get older, that like when I think back of my childhood, I'm like, I can't really think of much else. But, you know, when a stranger calls, when she gets that phone call, those are the things that I have stayed with me forever. You know, when Jason comes out of the water at the end of the first Friday the 13th and pulls her in into the lake, it's like that stuff. It just sticks with you.
When you were getting started in the industry, were there any horror icons from your childhood that you drew inspiration from, like any Wes Craven, George Romero, any of those types?
For me, it would be, I mean, if I chose one, it would definitely be John Carpenter.
Oh, God, yes.
Yeah. And, you know, and that's the thing about, you know, we talk about The Boy and it being a first film, but if you watch Friday the 13th, you know, I know that's not John Carpenter. But, you know, Jason doesn't put the mask on until the third movie. Mm-hmm. And people don't know that necessarily if they haven't followed it since the beginning. Yeah. But in particular with Halloween, you know, a lot of times the movies, and they can still be great, but as they create more and more sequels, and then John Carpenter backed away from Halloween, right, after the first movie, same way that like James Wan backed away from Saw, directing it anyway. And but then you watch that first film and you're like, it's like a Hitchcock movie. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't have that much of a body count. Mm-hmm. Most of the people die right there in the last 10 minutes. And it's a slow burn movie. And I love that about it. So that's what is most inspiring to me, is what that first film was. And then what it turned into is awesome. But yeah, John Carpenter, I mean, you know, you look at his Christine and The Fog, and there's just so many things that he touched in the horror space. And the music, you know, the music, it's just incredible.
Do you know just like the all famous Halloween theme? You ever heard the story of how he just came up with that in a little short time span because he needed music for the movie, and it ended up becoming probably one of the most famous horror movie themes of all time. It's just
the whole score, that whole score. There's multiple themes in that score that are like still to this day, other than the fact that it's such a kind of a thin sounding lo-fi sound that's very specific. The melodies, the haunting melodies, and the rhythm of those different pieces are just just amazing.
Absolutely.
I mean, they just still, for me, inspire any kind of scary, suspenseful moment in the story that I'm working on.
Now, what do you consider, going back to your early career, your biggest break that gave you, took you to the next level?
I guess, doing that tiny film, which was called Sparkle and Charm, was certainly like, so many people were helpful, and the fact that we were able to make that movie ended up kind of leading me to an agent. So that was a big deal, but it wasn't like a moment that happened overnight. It was just looking back, it was like, wow, that led to that. But after that, the guy who I wrote a lot of stuff with and created stuff with, Matt Peterman, we had just become friends and wanted to create something amazing. And I was kind of in the mind frame of creating something I could make, like a tiny movie. And we were a bit frustrated. And so we just decided to write something that we want to see, who cares how. And we wrote this kind of high concept movie, which was basically kind of Jason Bourne with a video game. The way Stay Alive was like Freddy Krueger almost with a video game. And then we ended up selling it, to Universal with Gale Ann Hurd, producer of The Walking Dead, Terminator producer. And that was a huge break. And we never kind of looked back. And, but it was a break more in writing. And, but none of those movies ever got made. And so we wrote these big studio kind of movies for about 4 years. And then finally we're like, I'm fed up with this. I want to make movies, not write movies that go up on a shelf. And so that's when Stay Alive, which was an idea we had for several years, we just kind of, pushed into existence against the wishes of our agent, who did not want us to make the movie. But so yeah, it was probably that script was like the thing that really, really turned the corner for me.
Between writing and directing, which has the closest spot to your heart?
For me, for the longest time, people would ask, like, "Are you a writer or you're a director?" And I'm a filmmaker, like I'm a storyteller. And so all of it is a byproduct of the other. I mean, a script and editing, which I've edited on almost everything I've done. They're all just forms of the storytelling, they're forms of filmmaking. So I wanted to get to a point where I could speak everybody's language, so I can speak to a writer about writing, I can speak to an editor about editing, special effects, visual effects. It's a little bit of everything, which is very much kind of what a director sometimes is. It's very much a jack of all trades and a master of none. So I'm probably, kind of like that, trying to become a master, but understanding everything was really important for me so that I can balance all the different things. So director would be really like the title if you had to choose one, but filmmaker is really kind of how I look at it.
I agree. A jack of all trades. I actually totally understand that. Now, let's go back to Separation. When is the official release date?
The official release date's April 30th, this Friday, or I don't know when this
it's
is.
Friday, yeah. On April 30th, yeah. Is it coming only theaters and on demand? What's the status?
So and it's really cool because we didn't know throughout all of COVID, like how we were going to approach the distribution for the movie when everything started kind of falling apart and in the world. Yeah. But we're only in theaters. I think we announced finally today, it's like 1,750 theaters, 1,800 theaters. And so everywhere. And we're only in theaters for the first 30 days. And then it will be released internationally through Universal and on VOD and streaming, after I think a 30-day window. So kind of,
pretty close.
A traditional release, but not day and date, but not a 3-month window, like a nice 30-day window so that, it's only available in theaters, which hopefully will help get people, out to theaters again.
Get the people to theaters, and then the people who saw it in the theaters, word of mouth is very big in movies. And so It's going to do great. I have no doubt. The movie is great. I'm not just saying that because I'm talking to you. I really did enjoy the movie very, very much.
Really appreciate it.
What was your impression when you saw the final product for the first time of Separation? Were you proud? Do you wish you would have done something differently? What were your feelings if you can separate yourself as you being the director and just watching it from a fan's perspective? Did you have any regrets, or was you like, okay, we got this, we nailed it?
I mean, I always have. I wouldn't call them regrets because I'm pretty okay with the fact that some things are, good and bad. Like I can't exactly control, so I don't beat myself up over it too much. But it was one that, because of COVID especially, took longer to finish, but also allowed me to take a step back and really take some time with it. So it's, for me, like a really special movie. It's different. I was very appreciative and grateful to all the producers and everybody involved. They kind of let me tell a very personal for me story, and not rush through that part of the movie.
Yeah.
I work with a lot of friends over and over, and then always meeting new people when I'm making movies. So, I always have things I wish I could fix and change, and that I would have been able to do again. But in this case, so many good things have come out of it that the good so far outweighs the bad. So it's like, I'm really grateful for how it turned out.
One scene watching the movie yesterday. Now, we all know, even just from the trailer, that the mom dies. That's no big spoiler, no big secret.
Sure.
And it's going to happen when she's talking on the cell phone and crossing the street. I think you did a brilliant job not rushing that. She crossed three, and she got hit on the fourth street.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, it's coming. No. All right, here we go. Nothing. That was brilliant. I'm sorry. I pay attention to those small details, and you built up to it. I mean, you took something that the audience knew was going to happen, but you still managed to make it kind of surprising. How did you go about that?
Well, in that exact way was trying to create something that felt like it happened right in front of you, hopefully kind of a bit of like, wait, how did they do that moment? And it was a complex series of shot, or complex shot. And for me, like I said, I appreciated how much everybody involved supported the way the movie takes its time in certain places. And of course, the movie doesn't really have a villain, if you will, or a ghost until mom dies. And that doesn't happen for a while. And what I liked about that was, you paid a lot of attention to the trailer, and so you knew it was coming. And I know people see that in the trailer, and I've had other people say the same thing about like how they maybe didn't expect it. I was like, well, you saw the trailer, right? I mean, they're like, well, yeah, I did see that in the trailer, but I think my mind made me forget about it.
Mm-hmm.
But in particular, the story takes its time to develop, and when we designed that whole shot and created it, I was like, hopefully people will almost forget that this is a horror film by that point. And they're just, kind of lulled into this drama almost.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, wait a minute, I forgot this is a horror film. And there was a pretty gnarly death just then. So the idea was to kind of just make people forget. And especially with that shot, I was watching it last night with the audience and going, I wonder how many people know kind of what's happening, but also knowing the way that the shot works, that it does come out of nowhere. And hearing you say that, it's great.
It was.
Especially somebody who's really paying attention, and who was waiting for that to happen. It still kind of surprised you. I know some people have said some cool things about it. So it's, that's what's fun about storytelling, especially horror, is kind of surprising people or getting reactions from them, kind of like a roller coaster.
Exactly.
And
totally.
And that was one of those things that was like, really important to kind of try to do it in a way that would be satisfying for an audience and hopefully surprise them. Even if they know it's coming.
Exactly. That was my point. I knew it was coming.
Yeah.
It was just like, You did it brilliantly. We only have enough time for one question. There is one aspect of the movie that, not a lot of people get to talk to the director of the movie they saw yesterday. So I'm going to seize this moment. When Peter is having his red moments. Okay, can you explain?
Jeff, is that what you mean?
Peter, so I'm going back to his Homeland character, Jeff.
Oh,
yes.
right.
Peter was his Homeland character's name. Yeah. When he's having those red moment scenes, it kind of confused me as to what you were going for in those moments. Can you explain a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. That for me was, the Grimm figure is what I called the monster, if you will. And in her world, I called the Crimson Void. And so that's her kind of in between, it's in between heaven and hell and earth, it's where she's kind of trapped. And so as she's haunting him, in his sleep or in broad daylight, she's kind of introducing him to that, her side of the world. So that's what he's getting, is a glimpse into her, pretty kind of terrifying, but a different world.
Yeah.
And to where, as the movie progresses, that Crimson Void, that world becomes more and more present, to where the end of it kind of, culminates there a little bit. So that was kind of the idea, was those were kind of converging with the daughter, in a way trapped in the middle, which is almost literally kind of where the story led.
If it was the mom after her death and back as a spirit, in a way, she almost seemed to be forgiving of Jeff, as opposed to when she was alive. She was not the nicest person to her husband. Okay, I know he might have deserved it. Okay, for not becoming an adult, and but she wasn't very nice.
You're right, and Mamie really wanted to lean into that side of her character. And in a way, I was scared of Meryl Streep's character in Kramer vs. Kramer as a kid. I thought she was really evil until I got older and kind of was like, oh no, she was just dealing with like what adults have to deal with. It's it's not black and white. And so for me, I was like, in a way, some people will almost cheer when she gets killed, maybe, because wow, she was really pretty cruel to him.
She was,
but she was cruel to him because he was irresponsible. He's well-meaning, has good intentions, but he did screw things up. And over the course of the story, he continued to screw things up with her, with, putting her in harm's way, his daughter. So the more that happened, the more the Grimm figure, became frustrated. And it was, a lot of the movie is about him learning, both of them really, the parents, but learning to become a more responsible parent. Yeah. And to where by the end, it's like, he, not to give away stuff, but it's like he kind of sacrificed his life to save his daughter, and that led to the Grimm figure having peace to be able to trust that her daughter's going to be safe.
And move,
it's really fun.
Absolutely, it was a great movie. Brent, it's been an absolute honor talking to you. This hour just flew by. Thank you so much. You have any final thoughts you want to share with our audience before we say goodbye?
I'm just really excited for everybody to see the movie, and it's so exciting for me that in supporting the movie, you're also supporting the industry, but even more than that, you're supporting this, communal experience that we all have going to see film. And I feel like for a while, I thought that was maybe in the past, and we were, and streaming and everything was just going to be the new normal. But I found in the last month, especially, that going to the theaters, going to the movies is really a special experience. And I hope this movie, supports all that and makes it a big part of going back to the movies.
Absolutely. And I really do think that going to the movies, and I like how they're doing it, movies, 30 days, and then on demand, I think it satisfies everybody. And the movie is going to be a success. The movie, guys, is called Separation. It's coming out this Friday, as you just heard, to movie theaters across the country. I definitely recommend it. It's an amazing film, especially if you're into the supernatural / paranormal subgenre of horror. Brent, thank you so much. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in tonight. Till tomorrow, guys, on behalf of Brent and myself, stay safe and stay walking. Good night.
Thanks.